What's up, Lore Masters? Today's video is going to be another contentious one. So if you don't want the rather deep discussions, go check out my Dominion War series in the top right hand corner, or you can find the link in the description below. I'll be redoing that entire series next year, so enjoy how crappy those were given that they were early in my YouTube career. Also, if you haven't yet, I do a battle breakdown of the destruction of the Equinox. That is also in the top right hand corner and in the description. I highly suggest checking it out before watching this video. With that out of the way, let's just get into it. For those who have not watched the Voyager episodes, Equinox Part 1 and Part 2, the simple synopsis is this. The USS Equinox, under the command of Captain Ransom, was thrown across the galaxy into the Delta Quadrant. The crew of the Equinox were constantly hungry, constantly under attack, and constantly running out of resources and fuel. Unlike the USS Voyager, the Nova class was a shorter-range vessel that was never meant to last in long-term excursions. During their attempts to get back to Earth, when they had ran out of fuel, they found an alien species that might have been able to assist in their efforts to get home faster. While attempting to make first contact, the alien died and the crew discovered that its body could be used for fuel to get back to the Federation. They would be able to get back in a fraction of the time that was projected, and let's be honest here, the Nova-class vessel would have never made it if not for this discovery. Ultimately, the crew probably would have died. It is a statistical fact looking at the ship and where they had to go. And so, facing the prospect of continuing to fight and ultimately either to die of starvation or a raid, they decided to kill innocent aliens so that they could get back to Earth. Of course, killing an innocent being is something most people can't live with, at least not without justification. So how did Captain Ransom justify this to himself? Starfleet Regulation 3, Paragraph 12. In the event of imminent destruction, a captain is authorized to preserve the lives of his crew by any justifiable means. When it comes to this issue, there are honestly three arguments I see, and we'll hit them one by one. There's the regulation that I just quoted, that of what is expected for a Starfleet officer to do, that of what is expected for a Starfleet officer to do as defined by TOS, TNG, DS9, and Voyager, and what we would realistically see happen. First, the regulation. I said in the other video that it was my belief that Captain Janeway had no real authority to determine if what Ransom had did was wrong or not. In retrospect, I'm no longer convinced of that. Ransom was killing innocent aliens for his own gains. Should she have attempted to stop him? Probably. Did she go about it wrong? Hell yes. The deaths on both Voyager and the Equinox was also her fault, make no mistake. That said, the key word in the regulation that I think ensures Ransom was in the wrong is the word justifiable. Justifiable, as determined by the current culture, is defined as able to be shown to be right, defensible. I don't think many would find the slaughter of innocent beings to be right nor defensible, especially as a Starfleet captain. Going to the second piece, looking at it from the side of a Starfleet captain, these actions are reprehensible. Unfortunately, they are put up against Janeway, who is egregious in this episode. She gets people killed unnecessarily and ultimately will end the series doing the exact same, if not worse, thing that Ransom did. For these purposes, I'm actually going to look at Ransom's actions against that of the words of Captain Benjamin Sisko. Not a lot better as a role model, I'll admit, but I love this speech. In the DS9 episode, Rules of Engagement, Worf had been put on trial and charged with killing civilians. Ultimately, it had been discovered to be a lie by the Klingon Empire and he was found innocent. But Worf admitted to Sisko that it didn't matter, that he fired on a target because of bloodlust and didn't care who it was and who he was about to kill. He stated that he should have confirmed who he was firing on. In response, Sisko said this, "You're damned right you should have checked. You knew there were civilian ships in the area. You fired at something you hadn't identified. You made a military decision to protect your ship and crew. But you're a Starfleet officer, Worf. We don't put civilians at risk, or even potentially at risk to save ourselves. Sometimes that means we lose the battle, and sometimes our lives. But if you can't make that choice, then you can't wear that uniform." This, for me, epitomizes the Starfleet officer mantra. We saw this in the original series, we saw it in the Next Generation, we saw it a lot of times in Deep Space Nine, though again, admittedly, not all the time. And this is where Ransom should have shown it as well. These aliens were innocent. They were civilians for all intents and purposes. This regulation did not cover what he did. Ransom and his crew were Starfleet. That meant they would find a way home that didn't hurt others, or they would die. That's what you do when you're Starfleet. Of course, this leads into the last argument, which is, there is no doubt in my mind that most people watching this would not at least be tempted to, if not actually commit, the crimes Ransom is guilty of. Even those of you whom scoff and say you would never do this, that it is aberrant. I have my doubts on your sincerity. I don't think you're lying, I just don't think you're in that situation. It's one thing to look at something and call it bad. It's another to actually experience it and look at the prospect of starving to death. These actions were not justifiable by any metric. But they were understandable. Most in our civilization would do it. Though I'm not convinced what Ransom's actions say about the evolved humans of Gene Roddenberry's time. I also want to take a moment to somewhat lay this at the feet of the Federation. Hear me out, consider a moment. When you look at the Federation's prisons and their justice system, Federation prisons, even max security, is like the Hyatt Hotel compared to our system now. Granted, we don't know a ton about the prison systems in their century, but from what we've seen, it's not exactly a bad place to be. Now, I'm sure there is some kind of argument that Federation prisons are rehabilitation over punishment and revenge, but that's another video if we ever get enough information to really talk on it. For now, I would say that the crew were probably not all that worried if they had been caught. In fact, they may have been happy to admit it. What we saw on the USS Equinox made prison time look like nothing. In my review of the Voyager episode Nothing Human, I argued that the information should be used, that they were punishing the wrong man, and it was all circumstantial at best. But this episode for me is definitively different. Captain Ransom is wrong, and he knew it. He wouldn't have hit it if he thought he had the higher ground. Now, in no way does it justify Janeway's psychotic break, but he deserved to spend the rest of his life in a penitentiary, or at the justice system of the aliens he killed. But those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below.